Welcome to the BeDadly podcast, where we discuss all things Dadly, from being an entrepreneur while caring for toddlers to raising screenagers and talking the birds and the bees. We're here to help you traverse the vast and dynamic landscape of fatherhood. Enjoy practical advice, lots of puns, and even a few heart-touching moments.
And the dad jokes are pretty good too.
And now your host, Brandon Jones.
All right, listeners, welcome back. This is Brandon Jones, your host for the BeDadly podcast. And today we have my buddy, Ryan Loo. We've already been having a lot of fun. And Ryan, thank you so much for being here, bud. And we're looking forward to getting into this.
Yeah, thanks for having me. I'm really excited.
You bet. So one of the things I want to get into, because you and I have been talking over the last couple of days, and I want you to help the listeners hear like a little bit about your landscape, like in terms of your family, because you have a unique family setup. How many people are in your family? What's the house look like? Tell us a little bit about that.
For sure. So let's see. For starters, the family size is we have 7 children in the household. And then we also have both of our mothers live with us, my mother and my wife's mother. And then my brother lives with us. So the way I like to put it is every night I cook a meal. I prepare a meal for 12 people. And yeah,
that is a small village, dude.
It is. We're definitely a tribe. We do everything together. We've kind of built our whole life philosophy around it. Each one of us is integral to the family structure, is integral to all of our own growth and development. And it's really beautiful. We're working with it, because both my wife and I, we don't come from stable, unified families. And now, so it's totally a learning experience at the same time as it is our life.
How old are you?
I'm 32 years old.
So you're 32 years old. You've got a family of 12 in your house, basically. Mm-hmm. My friend, like that's just like, do you ever just like sometimes pause and look at your life and go, holy shit?
Oh, I mean, that's what my morning ritual is all about.
It's like some people have sun salutations and you're out there going, oh my gosh, how do I not break today?
Yeah.
That's pretty incredible. I mean, obviously you handle it with a lot of grace and a lot of intention. And just from the short period of time I've gotten to know you, I don't see you stressed really, which is kind of mind-boggling to me. How do you manage it?
Well, I guess it's perspective, really. I don't see what I'm doing now as a burden or as troublesome in any way. I actually see myself as extremely blessed and gifted with an incredible life. I'm abundant, maybe, in such a way of unconditional love, and just having all these people around that see me in such a high regard, like that is actually, it builds me up. It doesn't stress me. Don't get me wrong, there is the stress of the day to day. There is the process of managing, all that entails, or all that our life entails. But, when I always come back to that perspective of, man, I'm so incredibly fortunate to be gifted, these little souls chose me, they chose me to take care of them. So when I wake up and I have my morning ritual, it's about gratitude. It's really like tears in my eyes, like preparing myself for the day. Like, I get to see all these beautiful people that I love so much, and I get to work with them every day. And that really has diffused all of the existential troubles around it.
It's just so interesting, like to think about the contrast for so many families out there. Very few families, I think, are in the double digits, today. I mean, I know it used to be a thing. My grandfather comes from like 10 plus. I think my dad, there was like 10 kids. I mean, I know it used to be a thing, but today it just doesn't happen that way. And so it's so interesting to hear your perspective and your frame on being a father and having such a large family, when I think there are a lot of us running around out there, and I can speak for myself that, I only got 2 little guys, and sometimes managing picking them up at different times and taking them to different things, you get into this process of sometimes feeling like you're, driving Miss Daisy around or something, like you're like basically this driver, you're like an Uber driver for your kids. And it's funny, I appreciate your reframe, by the way, on what you just shared. And it reminds me of something I just recently heard and keeps circulating in my conversations, which is that It was shared by a woman by the name of Amy McCready, who I happen to listen to quite often. I really like her, but she was sharing this idea that instead of thinking that we have to take our kids to school, I have to make the kids dinner, I have to pack their stuff, I have to get them to practice. When they leave the house, it goes by so quickly and you realize, my gosh, I miss them and I miss all the little things, even the mundane things. And so she encouraged us and other listeners to focus on it more, or think of it more like I get to take my kids to school. I get to make them a dinner. I get to take them to practice. And I really loved that reframe. And I just watched you embody that, where it's like, like, how do you manage the stress, man? There's so many people. And you're like, well, that's not how I think of it at all.
Yeah, I love it. I love it, and we have love. Yeah, that's another massive component of it, is we're cultivating a unit that is inwardly loving and then externally loving because of that. And it creates an environment where we're able to, outsource things that we're not good at, and we're also able to lean in to whoever, we need it from, or be there for whoever needs it. It's just really this swirling vortex of all of our uniqueness, packed together. And there's really only two outcomes that can happen there. It's either like spiral up and get it, or it fractures. And we both, my wife and I, feel personally called to make sure that there's no fracturing, that we keep growing from this.
Man, I really respect that. But so but in a way, because I gotta hear, like, logistically, like, how does dinner work? Do you guys have a table for 12?
We do.
Oh my gosh, this is great. You guys like breaking bread. It looks like the Last Supper or something. You in the center, like Jesus Christ, like breaking bread with your family here.
We do.
12 people.
We have a large farmhouse table kind of style thing. It's really long.
Amazing.
Big benches that run along the side, and we actually have this nice little Montessori desk with a couple slide-in chairs that our younger kids eat at. Because it's a tradition in our family. All of our kids like to climb on the table when they're little, like just walking up and down. And we try to avoid that, some of us, but we just try to move it around. Sorry.
When I just pictured your dinner table and the family and a big group sitting around a dinner table, for like the slightest moment, I felt like not envious, but I was like, oh wow, maybe I want a large family. And then I was like, brought back to reality. And I was like, hold on a second. Hold on. But it was kind of dreamy. I was like picturing the table with a very large group. That's got to be even an entertaining dinner every night. You have so many characters that are at play. I think if it's just like mom, dad, and their one little kid, it's like, well, that gets to be kind of a bit of a boring dinner. But I can't imagine your dinners can be boring.
They're not. Yeah, they're all hands on. I made it a point early in this journey of raising all these kids that we had specific times set aside for us as coming together. We do have a busy life. We're on the move. Like, things are happening constantly, But I was like, our meals should really kind of help regulate our connectivity, breaking bread, so to speak.
Yeah, I agree 100%.
Yeah, so it is. It's really a wonderful thing that we've gotten good at and committed to, preparing a large meal for all these people and sitting down and having it and making that an intentional time we're together. Now, when you have, toddlers and a 1-year-old, and you have this whole spectrum of people being engaged in there, it's not always a quiet, like we're just jovial and laughing. And
I can't imagine. Yeah.
Sometimes one kid's feeding the dog under the table, and someone wants to take their food into their room. Yeah, it does vary and change, but the idea is that every night, we come together during that meal and express gratitude for the nourishment and for each other in that circle, and just really sinking into that 30 to 45 minutes that we have. And,
I just spent some time with my father and my brothers. It was my dad's birthday. Actually, today is my dad's birthday. And we celebrated it this past weekend. And it was cool because we were cooking for a lot of his neighbors, and there was just a big group together. But me and my brothers, my father's kind of taught us how to cook. My mom will admit, Mom, that she wasn't the most, she didn't have a whole lot of culinary chops, but she tried. but she just never really got into the kitchen. But my dad, oh man, this guy loves to cook, and it's kind of passed itself on. So now me, my brothers, we all enjoy cooking. So when we come together to prepare a meal, there's like a pretty good little kitchen going on. Like we all know how to work stations and how to help each other. And so what's it like? Do you have, I mean, are you cooking for 12 people? Are you guys taking different turns? Like, how's that work?
So yeah, we take turns. You know, it's one of those things where we're trying to establish what each of our roles, like between my wife and I as the primary providers, you know, what are our roles in the household? And I love to cook, and she doesn't love to cook, but she's efficient at it, and you know, and she's also takes some of those roles onto herself. So we really we balance it between the two of us, and then we get the kids involved, the ones that can. You know, like my 5-year-old daughter loves to chop carrots and celery.
Absolutely.
So we just get her up there on the bar with us, and she's chopping the stuff for us, and we're all just kind of throwing in on it together. But yeah, I'd say we bounce it back and forth. Whoever's feeling inspired or whoever has the bandwidth for it that day, you know, it's just, I always see, like, if I notice my wife is texting, I'm like, hey, I got dinner tonight. You know, I'll pick up the stuff, like, I'll whip it out, you just relax. You know, it's the same thing, too. She really loves, like, if I've been out all day, she loves to greet me with a hot meal. You know, and it's just a little act of service, too. You know,
that's beautiful, dude.
Yeah, it's beautiful, providing for people, period. And it's, I don't know, it's just warming from the inside.
Absolutely. A lot of reframes today, a lot of good stuff here. You know, I don't know. It's so interesting. Some of these things like getting the kids to school or making the meals or trying to get everybody to an event or to an outing. Like some of these things can become like really a lot of stressful moments, transitions for families. And I just love the way, because for example, you know, I remember being in previous relationships when I'd walk in the door, I don't think I remember being greeted with a warm meal. It was more like, you know, can you do the dishes? It's like, yeah, I guess so. I just finished work and I got this little guy tugging on me. He wants some time with me, but you know, it's just interesting. You're like, I'm greeted by, you know, hey, honey, it looks like you've had a long day. Why don't I make you a warm meal? So thoughtful and so nice. Like it really is beautiful.
I think it goes a long way. You know?
Absolutely.
Because, I mean, in a relationship, I think the ultimate expression, at least in our case, is service to one another. Because it is ultimately service to ourselves. Yeah, happy wife, happy life. Happy dad. I don't know of any rhymes
right.
for that one, but it's just, you know, if I could fill my wife's cup a little bit, you know, then she's that much more capable of providing love for our children in the way that only she can. You know, sometimes I can't. I do like getting on the floor and being close to my children, changing diapers and being nurturing and kind of stepping into that role. But it's not always the first priority on my mind. It's not always the first place I'm going to go. But however, if I can, you know, take my aptitude for service and apply it to my wife's cup, fill her up a little bit, you know, then she can provide all those things, which only benefits all of us because the equilibrium of the household is able to stay at a good place.
Man, that is so beautiful. I'm very much inspired. I'm definitely I love gifting and giving. Like I really am. Like I actually tend somewhat to be too much of a people pleaser. Actually, this kind of trait can, in my experience, for me, has been overused because I've used it in a way that wasn't always to my own benefit, right? I'll do cartwheels for people and for events like that I go to. Like I'm always the guy trying to help people, and you know, it's a good thing, but I get taxed sometimes. I can sometimes put too much in, and then when others aren't returning it, I can sometimes feel a little bit upset. But I love this. You said when I've noticed that my wife's a little taxed, I'll make an offer or a gesture. And I really love that perspective, just like giving the ability to just like notice what the family's needing and saying, hey, how about we fill this little area or nurture this little moment to help everyone out? Because ultimately, if that thing is taken care of, it's taking care of me. And I really love that.
She used to not like it when I would say, like, maybe I was frustrated or something or stressed.
Yeah.
And I would say, I did this nice thing for you, but it wasn't necessarily for you, because I understand that 3 moves after that nice thing that I did for you, it's coming back to me somehow. Like it was a form of self-preservation. And she's like, oh, now don't do anything for me if you're going to say it like that. I was like, all right, I'm sorry. It's not a bad thing. Like I am in service. Like I'm trying to be, to be.
She's included in it.
This. Yeah, but I'm just being
you're just
real
seeing the way the whole circuit's going.
Right. I'm like, well, if you're on tilt for the next hour because you had a long day, like, and I do nothing about it, then
and you're not necessarily doing it expecting something from her.
No,
it's not like, hey, I cooked dinner tonight. You think we could?
No, it's not like that.
Right.
Yeah, it's from my heart, and it's from my joy, and it's from the love that I have for her and for my children that I want to do it.
So speaking of the characters, I was saying, like, there's a lot of different characters. Tell me real quick, how do you get to know the characters in your family? I mean, how do you balance all of these personalities, and what's your advice on that?
I like to just jump right in. I mean, that's kind of the only way it comes to mind to encompass all of it. So with our older kids, we have a different development. They're all boys. They're 8, 11, and 13, about to be 14. So we kind of have a different tier of relationship. We can do physical things. I like to do yard work. We like to game a little bit, or I just like to dabble in whatever they're doing and keep them close by. And sometimes the oldest one gets to be in on things, like things that the adults know and that maybe he shouldn't. So I just try to build time for that. It's kind of a priority. Over most things.
Yeah, I remember you were sharing something with me just about how you guys really embrace everyone's unique difference. Like their specific makeup. I guess you could say that. You recognize that they're comprised differently, that they're organized in their personality type differently from each other, and so you guys choose to do things based on those types. You kind of know what I'm talking about.
Yeah, I do.
Yeah, expand on that for me. Like, how do you guys? How do you know their personality types? How do you get into organizing that?
Well, just through our own intimate understanding and connection with them, we get to know them a lot of ways. However, that doesn't paint the whole picture. And so, as we discussed, like I use human design to help with that, or any form of archetyping, really, astrology, human design, gene keys. And what's interesting about that is that it's a precise mathematical system. So it does reside in the realm of the esoteric because it's dealing with energy, but it's also mathematics. And after long enough time, you can really trust the information that's coming through. And so we try to use human design specifically right now to kind of get a feel of who they are as a soul type. Not necessarily what we see on the outside, because we only get a small piece of each person, but instead to kind of dig into what their real substance is, and what they really are inside, and it does wonders, because in that system particularly, there's different auric types, and they all respond to the environment differently, and they all are gifted in different ways in which they interact and do things, and the way they optimize or they work optimally for their specific design. And so I'd love to give an example, or at least just talk about it a little bit.
Yeah, please. I think this is very fascinating. I know that we use personality assessments. I was kind of sharing that with you about hiring from my previous company, and it was fantastic. Help the team understand how everybody works and how to complement one another as opposed to tear each other down, which can happen a lot of times when you have different types. For example, if you have a creative and you have a refiner, or somebody who likes to question things or likes to basically refine things, sometimes you get those two in the same room trying to operate at the same time. The creator is frustrated with the refiner, and the refiner is kind of like, hey, this creative they just won't stop thinking. We got to start doing, and so it really is it's great to let people know what those personality types are, and how they can orchestrate together. And so, please share some examples of how you guys have applied human design in your family and helped your family kind of understand one another and work together and kind of embrace their differences.
Yeah, absolutely. So like with the system, you have 5 auric types, and all org types function differently. It's broken down in a percentage, like per the population. Like for example, generators comprise 70% of the population, and what makes a generator is that they have a defined sacral center, right? And because that's considered a motor in the system. So you have centers that generate energy, and then you have other centers that don't, basically. And so, like in the case of our own children, we have the 7 children, and we have 2 manifestors, which is a different type of org type. We have 1 projector. We have 3 manifesting generators, and then we have 1 generator. And now all of them, with the exception of the generators and the manifesting generators, have different strategies and different ways that they interact in the world. So manifestors are a very small percentage of the population, and they're kind of the initiators. They have a strategy that is to inform. So it is their strategy in life to inform and initiate. Generators, they respond, right? And then projectors wait for the invitation. So, and a big part of the system, they call it an experiment, because when you take the system on, you're just kind of experimenting with it, right? Because we can't say for sure, like someone can't sell you something and say, yeah, this works, just do this, here's the steps, like it's gonna work. You know, this kind of builds in the idea that we are discerning beings and that we can decide whether or not it works for us or it does. You know, like there's a consideration of autonomy, I guess.
Yeah, free will.
Yeah, and so I really appreciate that aspect, because
absolutely. I mean, even if you look at string theory and stuff, I mean, there is not everything is as predictable as we'd like it to be. That's for sure, and change is actually the only inevitable, right? Like everything will change, and it's all kind of working towards a change. It seems like all of life seems to be in some ways working to try to either stay as a constant while resisting it, or just completely pushing through. But it seems that everything is changing.
Absolutely. Yeah. And that's exciting.
Yeah.
Depending on how you want to take it.
I suppose, it's funny. I'm sitting in my head going, well, is math changing? You know, because you mentioned it was mathematical. So it was interesting. It's like, you know, math has certain constants that we can kind of depend on. But it's interesting. Anyways, that's just my brain just spiraling.
Well, that's okay. I think it's interesting, too, that math has anomalies.
That's true. That's true. It does have things that kind of defy itself.
And over a long enough period of time, you know, if you have a sequence of anomalies that are inexplicable, that would kind of account for the reality that things are constantly changing.
Yeah.
Or at least kind of helps put it back into, you know, into a framework.
See, this is why I like having dialogues with other people, because, you know, if you're just thinking with yourself all the time, it's just, there's not enough variables that can be pulled in for the meaning, the pool of meaning that can be drawn from, you know, like just you and I, we create a little bit of a bigger pool, get, you know, a couple of people. And I mean, obviously I know that group think can be bad, but dialoguing about life is so valuable.
Oh, that's my favorite.
Do you guys do that a lot with your family? Is there a lot of times where you're contemplating things? Because I mean, golly, you've got a really great resource there with so many people.
Yeah, we actually will go as far as to ask, like, for example, back to the human designer projector. The projectors are like the teachers, the guides, the coaches of the system. Mm-hmm. We have one projector, and he is what's called a splenic authority. So a splenic has a lot to do with intuition and gut instinct, and you know, like instinct is probably the best word that sums it up completely. But we'll ask him on the spot if we're having trouble deciding what we're going to do in a moment. We'll say, "Hey, what do you think?" And then we just take his first response. I'm like, "All right, we're going to roll with that."
Wow.
And, you know, because he's designed that way to operate that way. So projectors have to wait for the invitation. So we have to invite him to give his opinion on something. And then when he does, we can trust that his splenic authority is direct and true and right on the spot because it's intuitive. And so we just take that answer and we roll with it. You know, like
that is so amazing. And you know, it's funny. It's making me think about how big of a boost in significance and belonging your kids must feel. Because I mean, in some ways, they must feel like, okay, look at this. My family is looking at me and giving me some authority here, or they're seeing my gifts. They're seeing how I belong in this picture, and they're giving me, a role, if you will, like in a place to contribute. I can just imagine. I know how big of a need that is for all of us, and a lot of kids, the parents are just kind of doing everything. And they also are trusting their own wisdom. They're not always looking to the kids for wisdom. And I know we use like a family meeting structure that we haven't been doing as much as we used to. But when we used it, one of the great things that we did is we said, hey, everybody's an equal here. Anything that's on the agenda, this is a family issue. This isn't a marriage issue, or this isn't a work issue. This is family stuff. And because it's family stuff, every one of us get to contribute in a meaningful way. So we're all equals. There's only I may facilitate it, but I'm not the leader of this. Your ideas will be counted just as well as mine. And then we would ask the kids for solutions to problems, and they come up with great solutions. I'm like, man, these kids are creative. And then I'd watch as they're like, when everybody go, that's a good idea. I would watch their spirit basically light up. They're like, whoa, you really thought that was a good idea? I was like, let's give that a go. I really think that's going to work. And I loved how, watching my kids respond to it. But now I'm even thinking like, wow, bring in like a human design element and really say, hey, look, you have this I think you said splenic authority. We're going to trust that your gut knows. And we all have that too. But it's really cool to know like this is a special gift that this child might have.
Yeah, it's specific to him and his design. And it's really wonderful because I have examples for all of them, that in that way, where we can source them for wisdom, which is something that we don't do enough.
Absolutely.
I mean, honestly, I have these memories in my own mind where I go back to my childhood, and I can't remember specifically what was happening, but there's always seems to be a golden ray of sunlight, projecting through my imagination.
Wow.
And, and to me that suggests viewing the world with this sense of awe and newness, which is something I think that we lose along the way. We become conditioned, jaded, we just kind of lose that part of ourselves, but kids have it always. They're born with it. They bring it in, and until we pile stuff on top of them, they will keep that.
Up until the age that they learn about Wi-Fi signals.
Yeah,
that's where they lose their whole wow, this doesn't work.
Why is it not working?
Life doesn't work. Something's wrong here, Dad. Darn it, kid! You're only 5 years old. Why are you already jaded?
Yeah, don't drop that. Yeah.
I grew up in a house where we didn't even have a TV for a long time. And then when we did have a TV, my dad was like, you can watch 3 channels. It was like Discovery Channel, the Cooking Channel, and it was, I think, PBS or whatever at the time. It was like, that's it, So I watched Reading Rainbow, learning how to cook, and sometimes I'd watch, Shark Week or something. But what about your house with it when it comes to technology and things like that? I mean, are there 12 people trying to decide who's going to watch what, or do you guys not do a whole lot of TV? What's that look like?
We keep it to a minimum for sure, because it is somewhat of a black hole, especially when it comes to personal devices and internet access. You can just go forever. It's constant stimulation.
It doesn't help that it literally is black. It looks like a black hole.
Yeah,
that's very interesting.
You can just stare at it and dive into it endlessly, and that's a scary thing.
Absolutely.
It's ultimate power. Do kids need to have that kind of power? But we also are very realistic and understand it's the world we live in. Technical competency is probably going to be a necessity moving forward. I can't say for sure, but I haven't found anyone that lives completely in the dark. And then is still active and relevant in the world. So we mostly just try to use it actually as the proverbial carrot on a stick. It's a great motivator. When it comes to screen time, especially our older kids, they will do an immaculate job at anything we ask them to do if there's that reward at the end of it. And we like to keep it in that privilege/reward category.
Gotcha.
Because with too much dependency, it can easily fall into that necessity category. It feels like it's a necessity that our kids are entertained, without having to do anything for it. And I think it's kind of a dangerous place to tread on, because you can create some habits and patterns that aren't necessarily useful. And so we I try to keep it to the weekends, and then or like a rainy day or something. I make exceptions, and I tell them specifically, I'm like, yeah, I could make an exception on any given day, and you could, get to experience this privilege, but that's not up for you to. That's not like for you to ask for or to request. It's at my discretion because, I don't control things, but I do have all the resources. I have the carrots, like they don't have the carrots. And it's really important you remember that, like, especially if you're someone that gets bowled over by your children's requests. You're like, oh, fine, like I give in. Like, you don't have to. You can literally determine exactly what it looks like, and you can stand strong in that and put up your boundaries, and kids will respect that. They do respect it.
I found that, I'm glad you said that. I found that kids are a lot like, they're kind of like a sparkler display. Like they'll put off a lot of, all these little sparkles, but really they don't have a tremendous amount of power. And that's why they have to let out such a, whatever their sound like, or their anger. But ultimately it really doesn't have a tremendous amount of power. And if you get caught up in it, you actually kind of contribute to the fireworks display. But if you do, and this is something I found recently, I'd say like in the last couple of years, is really, really, really powerful. And I actually wrote an email about it. So if you're on the email list, you've probably seen this, but it's the walk away. It's kind of like you tell them this is how it is. And then you say, I love you and I believe in your ability to handle disappointment, and I'm sorry you're disappointed. And that's the end of it. And then after you say that, you literally walk away. Now, if you're not in a place that you can walk away, or you're in a car or something, you just don't say anything. And then if they keep pressing you, let me just pause for a moment. That tool right there is so powerful because your kids realize right there is nothing they can do. There's no choice that they have. So the fight can end there. The only way the fight will persist is if you keep talking about it. You can say, I'm done talking about it, and I'm so sorry that you are upset, and I'm done talking about it. Now, if they keep pressing you, like my son sometimes, if he wanted to try to find a different way, so maybe he's looking for a solution, and I might say there's no negotiating. This is not up for negotiation. Might say that. But if there's something where I'm like, I can see he's just trying to see if he can make it work, and he's actually just trying to find some way where it works for everybody, and I don't necessarily want to just, because it could work, but I don't see the way you just told me is not going to work, right? Then I will say, if he's upset, I'll say, when your voice is as calm as mine, I'm happy to talk to you. And I give him back the locus of control. He has the authority to control his own voice, and I will continue a conversation, but I'm not going to continue a conversation the way he's talking to me. So those two things, the walk away and when your voice is as calm as mine, we'll finish this conversation. Super powerful, man. And it really allows you to really hold your authority without, like one of the things I've been doing when my little guy, who he like I said, he's got a lot of fire. I didn't say it on the podcast, but I told you earlier. Right. He has a lot of fire. I mean, when he gets mad at something, he is mad. Like he just has a ton of that energy in him. And so sometimes when he gets upset, he tries to let everybody have it, and he's going to, go off the hinges or whatever. And I just hold myself so quietly if I'm stuck in the car with him. If we're not in the car, I just walk away. I say, I'm sorry. When you're calm, I'll be happy to be around you, but I just need to walk away. If you don't want to go sit down and take space, I'm going to take space right now until you're calm. It's up to you. But as soon as you're calm, I promise you can, I want to be around you. So don't think that there's anything other than that. I want to be around you, but you got to be calm. And, so if we're in the car and he's losing it, he's doing his little fireworks display, I practice my breathing. I literally just start breathing. And what I do is I do this with Brian Johnson, which I really admire what he does with technology, by the way. This guy doesn't have a cell phone or a TV in his house. He doesn't do email, and he runs an incredible online company.
Wow.
Yeah. So we can talk about that later.
Check him out.
Yeah, absolutely. Brian Johnson is definitely my technology idol because he really does a great job with all of that. But he called it the one conscious breath. And it was this idea, like if we just take a moment to take a conscious breath, and his rules for this are always in and out the nose. that the only time we breathe through our mouths are in fight, flight, or free, like a heightened arousal state. And so we shouldn't breathe through our mouths. Even sleeping experts say we shouldn't breathe through our mouths. And breathing experts say we shouldn't breathe through our mouths, but most of us are breathing through our mouths. So in this breath, you do it in the nose, and it's up 6 for him. I think it depends on your lung size, but it's essentially up 6. So you inhale 6 seconds. So then you pause for 1, and then you let out. And here's the secret, 7 or 8 seconds. So the key is to always allow your exhale to be longer than your inhale.
I see.
And what this practices and what it builds is what's called vagal tone, which has to do with your vagus nerve and your ability to calm yourself in heightened states. So this works really well. It works really well even for like military guys, stuff like that. Anybody who deals with heightened states of arousal, if you allow your exhale to be longer than your inhale, it triggers your parasympathetic nervous system and actually helps your body relax and focus when you're in that state. So I've been practicing it for years now, and it's especially useful when my son is having a fireworks display and I really want to say, knock it off. Stop your screaming, stop whatever, which doesn't help anything. But I want to say whatever. Those are the things I want to say. And I just say, we need you to be calm. If I'm in a place where I can actually get out of the car, sometimes I'll say, hey, if you can't calm down, I think we're going to pull over and I'll just get out of the car for a little bit and let you calm down, because you're kind of like not making this pleasant for anyone. But lately what I've been doing is just breathing. I just practice my breathing. And I notice that he'll go for 30, 40 seconds, maybe a minute, and then he'll start to calmly breathe. And sometimes he even takes a nap because he was actually cranky.
Yeah, I just needed that touchdown.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, we've learned a few techniques about handling those firework things. I particularly can be immune to most of it.
Wow.
If we might have 3 kids sounding off at any given time. Mm-hmm. Someone got hurt outside, someone's really hungry, someone's cranky. Mm-hmm. And I can sit and stew in it and kind of observe and reflect it and just see what's going on here, who needs what, where am I in all of this? Because I'm constantly considering my own balance, my own cup in those moments. Mm-hmm. But my mother-in-law actually taught us with our twins, for example. They're highly emotional beings, which is great. They're highly creative and exciting and fun, but very emotional too. And she came up with something where she just will take one hand and put it on their chest and then one simultaneously on their back and kind of create like a bookends with their bodies and then address them like in that emotional state. Mm-hmm. And it's actually like done wonders. One of our twins will come right out of a whole fit. If we get down on their level, we get close, we look them in the eyes, we really give them all the due respect of an individual, anyone that we'd meet anywhere else. And then the physical touch in that heart space, really brings it all together. Yeah. Because those emotional displays, the fireworks are when you don't get something you want,
yeah,
when you feel like
you're upset,
right?
Yeah,
it's
completely
it's the same
natural.
Thing.
Yeah, and like with my son, for example, well, first of all, that is so powerful what you just shared. We teach it in the class, in the free class, we talk about connection before correction. And it's like meet the child's emotional needs first and then see if you still need to correct the behavior, because a lot of times you don't. And when you do go to make the correction, for example, hey son, I see you're really upset right now and I am ready to be with you and excited to be with you. And I need you to bring your energy down because you're screaming at people and nobody can talk to you like this. So there's a sequence, right? But the first thing is like acknowledging their emotions and saying like, I can see you're really upset, or I can see you're sad right now. And this is the other thing, and not but, which is very easy to fall into. I can see you're really upset, but you need to be, or we need to drive right now. And if you use but, it's such an interesting, it really does have an effect where the child gets defensive, where they're like, yeah, everything you just said just got deleted. I can see that you really need some attention right now, but, well, nothing's going to matter after that, right?
Right.
So I might say, like, I can really say you need some attention right now, and I'll be ready to give it to you whenever you can bring your energy calmer. Or, hey, I can see that you really want somebody to spend some time with you, and in 10 minutes I'll be done with my work and be happy to do that for you. It's like those kind of little things where you're addressing the emotional need first is huge. Really big. And I love the making contact with, especially with a little one. That's what they really need. They just need to feel seen and heard sometimes.
Oh yeah, and included. It's when you have, like in our case, when you have as many as we do, it's really easy to get lost in that sea of of beings, of bodies everywhere. And we've noticed it with each new child that comes in there. Each of them has their own ways for seeking that attention and that acknowledgement that they need. But physical touch, especially for your I would say even under 10, goes a really long way. Actually, it probably just extends endlessly, because even our 13-year-old will take a hug and love it and appreciate it for what it's doing for him.
I have a 13-year-old with an avoidant attachment, which is hard because I actually somewhat have it a little bit myself. Over the years, I've learned that about myself. It's shown up in relationships. I have that avoidant attachment style, and he does too, which is really hard. So when him and I, two avoidant styles, are trying to hug as first of all, also a teenage boy who's 16 and a dad who's a young dad, or whatever, there's always this energy, but it breaks my heart because so what I've learned to say to him is, and actually it was taught to me by his therapist, Lynn, who's this great guy, just fantastic. He's been such a blessing in our family, but he told me, a lot of times I would go to my son, I would say, hey, bud, we would have something going on, and I'd want to give him a hug. Maybe it was just saying goodnight or something like that, and I want to give him a hug. And I'd go to kind of give him one, and he would be kind of avoidant. And I didn't really know. I was like, dude, can you just give me a hug? Come on, man. Or sometimes I remember saying, you look like you need a hug. And I kept saying that. And one day, Lynn encouraged me to say, I need a hug, as opposed to you look like you need a hug. He was like, see if you can get him to give you one as a favor to you instead of going for him. And so it worked wonders. One day I stood in front of him and I was like, hey, I actually just need a hug. Would you be willing to give me a hug? And he was like, looked at me kind of crooked. He's like, yeah. And I was like, no, I just love you. And sometimes I just feel distance, and I don't want to feel distance. I want to feel close. Like, you're my firstborn son. Like, it's really important to me that we feel close together. And I don't know, I just need a hug, if that's okay. And so he hugged me. He's like, yeah, Dad, it's fine. And he gave me this warm hug. And I was like, yeah, it was almost like I just needed to flip it from you need a hug to I need a hug. And being willing to admit that that's what I needed at the time.
Absolutely. And that's interesting. That makes me think, like, how many hugs have I given my children when I really just wanted one?
Right.
And then I have to reflect on, like, man, I want 45 hugs a day.
Right.
that's a high demand. No.
Right.
That's part of the beauty of it. Like,
yeah,
being able to receive affection from a child. Like,
100%. Tell me about your family. Did you come from a large family?
Not exactly. I was raised by a single mother. I was the middle child of three boys. And we had a very turbulent life. There's a lot of addictions in the home, and a lot of ungroundedness, poverty, was rampant. I did not grow up with my dad. I didn't actually know my dad at all. Yeah.
That's tough.
Yeah, it is. And that was always...
I mean, if you never knew him, then... it's kind of not, you don't really necessarily know what you're missing, right? Exactly.
And I've actually, that was something that from my childhood that always came up. Like, people in the town always knew that we didn't have a dad in the house. And it's like, it was a glaring, thing that stood out about us.
Where did you grow up?
I grew up in a small town in Indiana called Clarksville.
Oh, okay.
And it's right across the river from Louisville, Kentucky.
Gotcha.
Yeah, so...
I could see that area...
It's interesting.
Not the black sheep, but like, here's this family, they're missing a dad, And what was that like? What did they, what were they like? Were they judgmental? Were they accommodating? Were they a mixture of both?
I think mostly they were accommodating.
Wow, that's nice.
Like everyone seemed to go out of their way to be like, yeah, I want to provide that presence. Like male coaches, teachers, you know, they all kind of felt like filled in as a substitute dad, so to speak. Mm-hmm. And then my older brother is also 10 years older than me.
Okay.
So his presence in our life also helped to kind of like provide some kind of form for that, but not necessarily anything that we were attached to.
It kind of reminds me of John, like the producer of the show. Kind of, he had his mom, and he was older than his other siblings, and so he was, he says the surrogate father, and it kind of sounds like maybe your brother held that role.
He did until he went, until he
left home.
Yeah, he wanted to pursue his own life.
What was that like? Did he become nomadic and go all over the world?
No, it's tragically is drugs and drugs and difficulty, and that's something that sits with me.
It's hard to lose siblings to drugs, man.
It is. It's.
Is he still alive?
He is. Yeah.
He's just still addicted.
Yeah.
Just not there.
And at this point in our relationship, I don't ever try to address him that way. Like I take him at face value for his qualities and for the things I love about him. And the rest of my family actually seem to think that I am judgmental because I'm not in that state of mind. And it's actually, and I've made it very clear in recent times, it's not judgment. What it is instead is it's like heartbreak. Mm-hmm. How do you see someone that you love not thrive?
Mm-hmm. And not be able to help them.
Yeah, not be able to do anything for a man that's my senior. Yeah,
absolutely.
So we kind of had that role, like back to my dad. We kind of had that role filled in different ways, but mostly I have championed the fact that I didn't have a father because in a world of toxic, quote unquote, masculinity, a blank slate, aka no conditioning.
You got to define what masculinity.
I got to just make it up for myself, and I as a man now, that's super fun, because I get to be in creative control of what this universal theme means to me. And I don't have anyone giving me any ideas of what that means, like other than the ones I choose to accept. So the perspective on not having my father in the house when I was younger, that could be difficult, and I have found myself probably less than 5 times to be like, man, I really wish I had some acknowledging older male figure to give me praise or to pat me on the back or to say like, good job, man. But I've actually found different ways to receive that support. Like, I like to think that I bring my dad into everything that I do now, because ultimately, he was dealing with generational wounding, generational difficulties. So it's not like he was necessarily a perpetrator in this regard. It's not like he's like,
he's somewhat of a victim of it too.
In a lot of ways, a victim of circumstance, a victim of what the culture was promoting, the travel, the fusion of the world, like all the different things that were going on, and so instead of being upset or wounded by this whole process of actually just taking it upon myself, and I'm like, no, this is what I inherited. This is my inheritance, and I'm proud of it. And I get to bring my dad along in spirit everywhere I go, so he can co-process it. He can have whatever healing he still needs, distantly or in the other reality or wherever they go, after this life. And
now, have you always been so optimistic? Were you born an optimistic child?
No, I wasn't. I was mostly an optimistic child, but then college and kind of figuring out what I'm supposed to do with my life, like at that pivotal teenage years, I didn't really know what to do at that time. Everyone kind of forced me the conventional college route, and I went along with it, even though I didn't feel it resonated with me. And then it all crashed and burned, and I was like, oh shit, what do I do now? This is what everyone told me was the way, what do I do now? And so I did go through a lot of kind of, I guess, darkness and shadow. And, I had to process a lot of stuff and deal with things like depression or anxiety, like all the real stuff that you still deal with,
But you didn't turn to drugs.
No.
Which a lot of people do. What did you do? What did it look like for you to find your way?
One part that I haven't been able to speak on yet is that when I was in college, and I was 20. I was home for the summer, and I received this letter from my half-sister, Geneva. And it was a letter with about 100 photos of her and her family. They were living in British Columbia at that time. And a photo of her holding me when I was little. And we hadn't had a relationship my whole life. I knew that I had a sister somewhere, but, she lived on the West Coast and we lived in Indiana. And within this letter, she revealed to us that we had 3 long-lost siblings on my dad's side. That she knew about them, but we didn't. Me and my brother, we had no idea that we had other brothers with the last name Loo that were around the country. Like, what? Kind of crazy. And my little brother didn't care so much about it, but I was extremely interested. If I'm being honest, I was fed up with my maternal lineage at that time. I'm 20, and there's the alcohol and the things going right. The
You're
tough
like, wait,
life.
there are other people that I'm akin to.
I'm like, oh, I'd like different
to meet
blood.
people.
Yeah, like I want to see what that's about.
Right.
And so that really kind of sparked a deviation for me when I received that information, because I became extremely curious. And so I went back to college. I went back to school, and during that time, I contacted one of them. His name was Zach, and he was over in Iraq as a medic during the war. And we just started emailing and really getting to know each other. And I like more and more as I communicated with him, I learned like, wow, you're just like me. The way he talks about his mom, like the things he's interested in. And I didn't know this guy at all. And here I am having like this really in-depth conversation with him, and it's my brother. Like, it's my actual brother, a half brother, but what's the difference? You just have slightly different noses, and that kind of set the tone for everything that happened after that. I failed out of college, and I still had this interest. I didn't fail out. I kept attempting classes because I was like, oh, this sounds really cool, I want to learn that. And then I would drop them because I'm like, this is really lame. It's just some lady up there clicking a button, and I'm like totally unengaged, and I hate it.
Right.
But so when that happened, I was kind of in this what we call a liminal space of where like anything can happen, but I was in the dumps. You know what I mean? Like, I wasn't really happy. I was pretty depressed. I was nearly homeless. I was like sleeping on my buddy's couch and eating a can of ravioli a day. And I would like I still lived in the town that I went to school in. And so I would actually go and ask students if they needed me to write papers for them. And so I'd charge them like a page price and just hustle that way to have a little cash in my pocket while I just sat there. And I was like, well, what am I going to do with my life now? And at this point, I'd actually gone on a road trip with my brother, Zach, met his biological full brother, my half brother. His name was Jerry Jr. So I'd met 2 of my brothers now at this point, like that I'd never known. And then, we had a working relationship. I stayed in touch, and I went to his wedding, and it was really fun in Minnesota, and lots of adventures in there. But to stay on track, I was in Evansville, nearly homeless, like really scraping by, and I had no prospect of what I was going to do. Like I didn't really know how I was going to come out of that. And that's when I really started picking up the books and reading, and it was mostly poetry and fiction because it really appealed to me, like the high sense of intellect, the creativity, the expression, the soul, like all those things really, really drew me in. But I remember it was a very profound day. I got a call from my brother, Zach, and he's like, hey, Dad's dying. Like, Dad's about to kick it. He's on a lot of pain medicine, he's dying. And I think you should really give him a call. And that was really interesting to me because I had never spoken to him at all. I'd never seen his face, never heard his words. I didn't get $5 in the mail. Like, I had no idea at all who this person was. And, like in that sense, there was no meaning to it whatsoever. Mm-hmm. But however, in this whole other sense, like in the sense of my destiny, my inheritance, what I was later to become, there was tons of meaning. And so I worked up the courage, to call him. And I remember the day clearly because it had like spring had just arrived in Indiana. The snow was melting, like the glare was shooting off the snow and hit me in the face, like from the sun. And I was just kind of pacing and watching the green patches of grass like rise up, back up through the snow. And it just had this really fresh sense of newness, and somehow that courage was with me because, honestly, I had really nothing else going on at that time. I didn't know what was going to happen. Mm-hmm. But that one thing came, and I was like, I have to make this call. And so I called him, And I remember that it was actually my Uncle Peter, his brother, answered the phone because they had stayed together pretty much their whole lives. And Peter, I think, was a caretaker for my dad in his later ages, another person I didn't know. But he answered the phone, and I told him who I was. And then he's like, oh, he's really messed up on medicine. I don't know if if he's going to be able to talk, but I'll give him the phone anyway. And he handed him the phone, and I remember that I just, like, as soon as I heard him croak, like, it wasn't even words. It was just sounds. I just burst out crying.
Wow.
Like right there on that street, pacing up and down, back and forth, just crying and crying and crying. I was uncontrollable, and looking back now, I understand there was other levels of healing transpiring there that were, cause for what was going on at that time. But I had no words for that kind of experience then, and up until that point, I remember that I had some kind of hang up around crying, around emotion, expressing emotion. I couldn't, I was numb. And then suddenly, like, here comes this huge swelling of emotion that just happens to correlate with a father that I had never known. And that really just, I don't know, that really broke things open in a big way for me in my journey. I've tried to discern where things really started for me. And like, I would think that was probably the biggest moment because, it gave me this idea. I don't know, like, it just, gave me a trajectory or something.
Yeah.
Just something, some movement, some motion, some idea of something happening for me.
Things had been kind of stagnant. You get this call, your dad's dying. You make this call to this person. It hasn't been in your life at all. And all of these things culminate, they emerge, and they burst through you. You have this cathartic, beautiful moment, even if he wasn't even capable of receiving it himself. It wasn't for him, it was for you. And you had some closure, and then this spark is like this thing that starts a new fire for you. And then what happens? Where does that journey take you?
So at that point, I decided to reach out to my grandparents. And they had, both of them are deceased now, but they had a 700-acre tree farm in Kentucky. And we went up there as kids, and that was another strained relationship because they weren't biological to me in any way. And so my mother was their stepdaughter, or adopted daughter, essentially. And it was always beefing like families do, and it was always really uncomfortable. But I've always been very compassionate and empathetic, and I wanted to have a relationship with my grandparents and with my mom. But at the time, whereas my mom did not represent structure, or my home life didn't represent this nourishing environment that I needed, the farm did. Because I knew that my grandma had 3 square meals a day on the table. I'd been eating 1 can of ravioli to myself for 2 months at that point, 3 months, I can't remember how long. But I knew that there was like a clean, warm bed. I knew that there was land to roam. That was actually really the highlight of what I wanted. Like, what I really wanted from that space was to essentially be able to come back into a home environment and be taken care of a little bit, and then roam around the land and get in touch with nature in a real way. And really start diving into these books and different things that were calling to me, because it was at that time, like, after I'd spoken to my dad, I was like, what, I'll be a writer. And when I thought about that in my mind, like, that can be anything. A writer can be any type of personality, period. Like, writing just something you do. It's not something necessarily you embody. Like, it doesn't have a particular style or look. And so that, I love the freedom within that terminology to be whatever I wanted. So I was an adventurer, a writer, a poet. It's just basically how I started thinking of myself so that I could have this framework that really supported the kind of life that I wanted to live. And so at that point, like, as I'm identifying as a writer, I'm reading more writers. I'm getting in touch with these movements that were happening throughout the land in terms of like psychedelics or spirituality or what have you, and then I have this giant farm that I can explore myself, not only, but also I can explore the range of what's going on out there.
Wow.
And I remember I started getting into mindfulness at that same time. And this is like a silly practice that I did, but it was so interesting. I had this one spot, it took me about 3 miles of hiking to get back to it. It's down in this valley, and big tall trees everywhere, and there's rocks and dirt. And I would go down there and meditate. And sometimes I was actually sneaking cigarettes down there because my grandparents thought I'd quit. But at that time, one time I decided, I was like, I'm going to go down there and do a naked meditation. That was like my whole intention, was to go out into the woods, strip down all my clothes, and just sit there in the dirt, like bare-assed, and really just see what happened. See what happened with that kind of mindfulness. And I remember writing about it, like, even though I knew no one was around, my mind was still telling me, like, was still suggesting that maybe there was like a ranger or someone like out in the woods seeing me doing this like weird thing. And it wasn't a weird thing, it was very revealing. It revealed to me in a lot of ways of how insecure I was just naturally with who I am, like, wow. At that time, at least, like how insecure I was, basically, is what came to mind. Now that I'm completely stripped down and vulnerable, like, all I want to do is cover myself back up. And it's like, what shame do I have to hide? What is that? And so that really helped me get on my feet and reorient my identity in a way that really I wanted. And it was actually right after that. My dad didn't die after that first conversation. He died about 6 months later. I had a second conversation with him where he was a little more lucid while I was out on the farm. And I remember I was just sitting on a hillside, and there's golden wheat in the wind, and the sun's going down, and I'm talking to him. And one thing that he had said that just really tickled me was, he was a big fisherman. Him and all of his brothers were really big into fishing. That was like their whole thing. Like, that's what they did all the time. And he's like, I really just wish that I could get all of y'all together and we can go fishing. And I was like, that's sufficient unto me to realize now that this relationship is closed in this capacity. Like, that was a good thing. Like, right. I was like, that's a beautiful.
Now we can go fishing.
Yeah, now we can go fishing, man. Right. I'll go fishing one day. You can come with me. I thought you meant
that sarcastically.
No.
Like, now I know that you love fishing. Well, that's enough information for me to know that this is a closed relationship.
No, it was impressive to me that he was lucid enough through the medication, to be able to say something like that. And since I knew the significance of fishing to him, I knew that there was really something special that he was trying to relay.
That's great.
And he passed shortly after that. And I decided then that basically I was going to become a long-haired, cool guy, hippie dude that writes poetry and walks everywhere. And, it's just like the cool guy not the cool guy, but the chill guy in the room. Like, I am highly intellectually driven, and so that's always kind of been my ace. And what I bring to a lot of things is a gift of gab and my perspective, things like that. And when I started identifying as a writer, I said I gave myself what I called a 5-year window of grace. And the whole idea was that I took my hands off the wheel completely. From 25 to 30, I had no control. Or I tried not to control anything that was going to happen in my life. I tried to completely just let it be what it was going to be, because I'd really tried to control everything up to that point and really suffered for it. So I was like, well, maybe I can just let it go now and just let the universe provide for me whatever's meant for me. And man, that was the most wondrous process for me, because all I really had to bring me through that process was just an image of who I wanted to be. So, I mean, literally a visualization of what I looked like after that 5 years was over. And I used to have hair down in my butt, and I did the whole thing. Like, even now I like to wear my wide brim hat and still play that role, but just allowing myself to live that way without any judgment of myself, that was like really the big part of it. Was like, I'm not going to take anything out on me for not having a home, or not having not succeeded in college, or coming from a broken family. Like, I'm not going to judge myself for that anymore. I'm just simply going to like follow this image, give myself 5 years, and see what life has to bring for me. And it was less than a year into that journey is when I met my wife. Wow. So, and I had this open acceptance to everything that came my way. I was like, this is how it's meant to be. Like, this is the agreement I have with myself. I have to keep rolling with it. I have to keep moving forward. I have to see what develops out of it. After the farm, tensions ran high there, because when I lived with my grandparents, my grandfather had Alzheimer's. He was on his 17th year of having it at that time. So my grandmother had been his primary caretaker for the whole process. So no one else was helping. It was all her. And I came up there to help partially, and also to get what I needed, which was that warm, structured, tendering
Pretty good
home.
at that.
What?
Helping to get what you need.
Well, if we want to segue back into human design for a second, they use what's called your incarnation cross, and it really sets the tone a lot for what your purpose and how you interact is, because it's the cross of certain gates. And mine is called the left angle cross of demands. And every cross has a different definition. Demands, in my case, is basically I have energy that is not only appealing but highly useful to people and their efforts and what they want to do. However, I'm only willing to part with it if there is a reciprocal exchange. Yeah. So it's like I'm perfectly willing to part with my energy so long as it benefits me as well. It's just really give and take. And I bring that to everything that I do. Like when it comes to my kids, everything. It's like
servant leadership.
Yeah. And I know too that if I put in a certain amount of energy and it's not reciprocated, then I now know that that's not a relationship that needs to continue. Right. Because it's not in alignment with how I am. Anyway, I went up there to help with my grandfather, and that was the whole thing, because he just had a stroke, and it was like we pick him up in a lift and carry him across the house and put him down and feed him cereal. I ended up leaving after being there for 6 months, and they all felt really burned. My grandma used the words that I had used her to get on my feet, basically. But they wanted me to go back to college and do something that I knew that I wasn't meant for. And so I left, and I went and hung out in Indiana again, in Bloomington, for a year. And that was a really amazing time, because I was exploring this person that I was becoming. Right. I was exploring this idea of being a writer, of being a spiritual, of being on the beat, so to speak. And I was really just allowing that to course through me and embody that. And it was at the end of that chapter is when things really picked up. That's when I met my wife. I remember being in a house with two friends. We all got a house together. I just moved in there, and my mom calls me up, and she's telling me that she was up on speed for 3 days with her boyfriend in Indiana, and she's telling me she needs a place to stay, and she's leaving him, and it's a whole huge mess, and I bring him, I'm like, all right, come on up to Bloomington. You can chill. You can be with me. And sorry, I'm getting really off track. I'm losing my train of thought. I think I need to eat.
Yeah, I know how that goes.
Yeah, but so when I brought her up there, I was super open to helping her out, but I was like, you have to do this. You have to get on your feet. You have to make this next move. You have to do what you're going to do. And then she was not willing to do that. She was very reliant on me for just the 2 days that she was there. And that's when I knew that it was time to close that chapter up and get on to what was next. And so I got online, and I was experiencing a lot of spiritual highs like I'd never experienced before. I remember one particular situation where I felt like my entire soul was trying to leave my body through the top of my head. And I felt so light, and the associated emotion was I wanted to simultaneously cry and laugh at the same time, and a ball on the ground.
I actually know that exact feeling.
Yeah,
I've actually had that feeling. I was 24 years old, I believe it was, standing in a rose garden, and I had actually taken a small dose of mushrooms, and I did it alone. And I was walking in this rose garden in the back of this property that I was at, and that I had been staying at. And I was walking through this garden, and I could feel with my feet, this questions were emerging in me, but I was feeling connected to source, to the universe, to God. And the statement, "What's the next step?" or the question, "What's the next step?" came up while I was walking, and I could hear it was almost "What's the next step?" in my feet, and I was like, "Whoa, that was weird." And then I started to look up, because I had been looking down at the flowers, and the sun was setting. And just as the sun was about to crest the horizon, I was seeing the sun, and I felt super connected to it. All of a sudden, I was like, "Whoa!" Me and the sun locked in, and it said, "Ask a question," and I was like, "Whoa." And all of a sudden, I could feel all of my hair on my arms and on my legs started tingling, and the hair on the back of my neck started going up. And I was I felt I was connected to source in this way. Like my soul was like rising up in my body, and my body was becoming like not there almost. Like it was just feeling super light. And then I saw the sun, the last ray actually shot across the sky as the sun went down, and it hit me in my eye. And it was right when I said, first I actually said, can you show me love and understanding through your eyes? That was the question I asked. And nothing happened. I could feel a staleness to the question. And then I was like, wait, there's something wrong with that question. And I was like, can you? If you're talking to God, can you is kind of a weird question to ask. Will you? And the moment I said the words, will you, the last ray of light hit me in my eye. I felt my whole body burst into like light, and I started to like laugh and cry simultaneously. It was a really bizarre and spiritual experience. It was a heightened experience. For 2 days, I told every person I knew, from my parents, like everybody, that I had had an experience with God, and that God revealed to me like that it's 100% real, that there's nothing questionable about it, and that I was going to experience love and life through God's eyes. And so I started kind of always having, even my prayer, like, make me an instrument of thy divine will. Like, let me be your instrument. Let me see through your eyes. And I started to look at homeless people different. I started to look at, things that weren't necessarily beautiful different. I started to just see everything different ever since that moment. But yeah, it's interesting. I've had that emotion of laughter and crying simultaneously, and lightness.
With the light, yeah, that blew me open huge, and there was some pretext to that, because in Bloomington, Indiana, I had developed myself in such a way that I was really happy with the person I was. Like, I was riding every day. I walked everywhere. So I'd walk up to 10 miles a day, and I was totally cool with it because I had nothing else to do. I just had all my time to myself. And so I really felt like I was just really cultivating a really strong sense of self and ownership of who I was, and I was celebrating that. And I remember I went online, and I was like, man, I'm just feeling so high on life. Like, this is so wonderful. I'm growing. Like, this is beautiful. And my sister, who we've always been connected online, she reached out to me, and she's like, well, do you want to come out to the mountains, or do you want to come out to Creststone and get your ass kicked by the mountain spirits? That's what she said on there. And I was like, yeah, I'm totally down to do that. Like, let's make a plan for next spring. Like, let's put something together and we'll make it a thing. And she's like, well, I'm actually going to be there in 5 days. I'm going to swing. I'm going up to Michigan to get my daughter. And I could just swing by and pick you up. And wow. I was like, what?
Here's the alignment.
Yeah, I just I don't want to say secured, but I had a really passionate, loving relationship with a young woman from the university there. Like, it was short-lived. It was like less than a month, but it was one of those things that's like really hot and deep, and then, and then it ends. And then, let's see, I had two of my best friends that I've ever had at that time, that personality. I had all this stuff that was really building there, and all of a sudden she's like, yeah, in 5 days, like, I can take you away from all of it. And I was like, I'm in. I'm leaving all my stuff here. All I'm going to take with me is some books, a couple changes of clothes. I had $17. I never met my sister at that point when I agreed to leave with her. And I was like, I'm in. I'm going. And I found out she lived in a spiritual community in Colorado called Creststone, and I looked it up online. It has a Wikipedia, and I was like, oh, cool, there's 28 unbroken lineages of spirituality here, and I'm interested in that stuff right now, so let's go. Like, let's go out to the mountains. And I told her, I'll camp in a tent. Like, I'll do whatever I need to do to stay in the area. You just got to get me there. And that was the end of everything. Up until 25 was over at that moment when I left. Like,
that's like the beginning of the hero's journey. You got the call, the departure. You had to answer the call. Yeah, and now you're leaving everything behind.
Yeah, and she was that vessel. She's still really close to our family now to this day. It's just like, I have such honor and reverence, and just I'm amazed at how she knew how to orchestrate all. Maybe she didn't, but she did. Like, she was there all along the way, leaving the signs, and it just led me from one thing to the next. That very town is where I met my wife, and that's what has spawned this now. That's an adventure all in itself. Like, yeah.
So did you meet those spirit gods?
I did. Yeah, I actually had, on 2 occasions, I had encounters with what I could only describe as interdimensional beings. One of them was in a ceremony called Uwipi ceremony. It's allegedly a 10,000-year-old ceremony that very few practitioners have the mantle for, but it doesn't involve any psychedelics. It just involves darkness and drumming and song and the proper setup of the altar. But in that ceremony, I definitely saw something that, rattles flying around the room, long, slender shadows that I just couldn't explain. There's definitely felt like something else was in that room. It definitely felt supernatural, undeniably. And then the other time was in a dream. That woman that I was connected with from Indiana still, she fought, we stayed in touch when I left for Colorado just a little bit. We entertained the idea for coming out to visit. And I had this bracelet that I wore for her. And it's just I like to wear charms. So if someone gets me a gift or something, I'll wear it, because it means a lot to me that someone gave me a gift. And I remember I had this charm, and then I had this really strange night sleeping in my tent where I slept for 18 hours, tossing and turning from 4 in the afternoon, just constantly slept all for the next day. But I remember that night, it was the strangest sensation because I kind of kept waking up, but I couldn't tell if I was in a dream or if I was, in real life still, because, where Crestone is 8,000 feet in a valley in the mountains, and it was a full moon that night. So there was this pale moonlight coming through my tent, and I kept seeing kept feeling this presence in the tent with me, or something was around me, something was trying to communicate with me. I didn't know what it was because I was in that dream state. So I kept falling back asleep and waking up, and at one point I swore I saw this shadow figure reaching into my tent, and I was like, what's that? And I fell back asleep. When I woke up the next day, that bracelet was gone. I looked everywhere for it. I looked all over my tent. I shook everything out. I dug around in the sand around my tent. It was gone. I couldn't find it. And, that very day I had a phone call with the woman that I was connected with in Indiana about how it's just not going to be a thing. It's just not meant to be. And I was like, wow. I couldn't deny what had just transpired there. I was like, okay, that's definitely the truth of it. Right. And a part of me was a little sad because of that, but the other part of me was just kind of just blown away by it. This isn't really meant for me. That's wonderful. Thanks for the sign. But the fact that it came through supernaturally was also really huge for me because, you hear stuff about that.
Right. And then you experience it firsthand. You're like, oh my gosh, this can really happen.
And how do you even validate something like that happening to you?
Yeah. It's hard because there aren't that many times where you co-share an experience of a phenomenon. I mean, it happens, but it's fairly rare, And it's did anybody see that? Did you notice? Whatever. It really is a challenge because a lot of times it is just meant for us. It's not meant for a whole group. It's for our thing. A sign, an omen. A lot of times it's for you. So that's really cool. So after that moment, I'm just going to ask you this: is that where you started to kind of feel more connected to to the universe, to nature? Is that where? Because were you always like that, prior to this, or is when you started moving into that? Because you were an intellectual, you were studying, you were kind of learning more and growing, and you had created this identity. I almost had this image of it's like a canvas where you've cut out the edges of the canvas to represent the body, but then what gets painted on it, you left kind of up in the air. You had this kind of vessel you've created for yourself in 5 years, but not necessarily decided what the paint would look like or what colors would happen or anything like that.
I'm trying to think about that now. I don't know when things really shifted or changed. I could say that it was due to love, and then her particular affluence for psychedelics. That was definitely heavily involved in the process of
her being the girl you left.
No, this was another one.
Okay.
I have often described the feminines can be guides if you're open to that. because all of our interactions, everyone has a different way in which they interact with the feminine in relationships and stuff like that. And in the case of my own life, being raised by a single mother, and then like my sister delivering me to my wife, like the feminine has had like a certain kind of role in my life, is like, I don't want to say signpost, but like there's definitely milestones of development or transformation or change that has occurred around like each significant relationship that I've had. And the first one that I had out after I dropped out of college, she was into psychedelics, and I kind of dove into that as well. I would say like she actually explained to me that I had a beautiful soul. I remember that. And I've always revered her for saying that, because I had no concept of a soul up until that point. I had no idea. Like, I didn't really think about it that much. I was aloof to it. Like for most of my life, like my mom was heavily atheist. She just didn't want to believe in God. She still doesn't. She doesn't want to believe in a higher power. She wants to believe everything is logical and rational, which is highly counterintuitive to what I know of the feminine these days. But that's what she was. And so I kind of had a little bit of that, but it quickly turned to agnosticism with my own sense of curiosity. Like I acknowledged that there was something, but I had no idea how to define it or what it looked like for me. Yeah. And then through that girl telling me that I had a beautiful soul, and the mixture of psychedelics and really just seeing this expansive world and take place inside my mind, that kind of really opened things up in a big way, which was good and bad. You wake up and then you have some darkness because you have realization that sets in. And
now you're managing this house of 12. Are psychedelics still a thing, or is it something that you guys use like very, very rarely, or you never do, or what's that look like?
We still use them, but only ceremonially, only with immense respect, only with intention, and only through communication with the medicines that we choose. Like for example, if mushroom medicine is coming up in conversation left and right, it's like, it's trying to communicate with us. So maybe there's time to consider that now. But we do try to make it extremely, it's not recreational anymore, basically. It's when we do it, it's work. When we do it, it's healing. When we do it, it's exploring. It just has a different function in my life now and in our life now as a family than it did before. I've actually held a ceremony for myself, my wife, our mothers, and my brother. And I build a big fire, and I bring them all in on it, and I set base rules for what it means to be there in that ceremony. Like, we never speak illy of anyone that's not present. We always speak with reverence. And honestly, we don't speak that much. You want to sit there and kind of reflect and use the fire as a muse, so to speak, like to kind of, prompt these things to come up that need working on. And also, all of us being on the same page is really fun. I become the inevitable leader under the medicine, like, because I like to take that stage. I like to guide, and I like to illuminate kind of the things that they're going through. Like I enjoy holding space for people to open up and share what they're going through. And I love bringing information to that process. So yeah, we still use it, but ceremonially, I would say almost exclusively.
You shared a poem with me after our first phone call. And who was it?
Khalil Gibran is
that's right,
the poet.
And what was great about that is that poem held a quote in it that I've used for a long time, and I never knew it was a part of that poem. I actually got it from Wayne Dyer, because I went to a Wayne Dyer event. I talk about it a lot, but because it was a very powerful event. It was something I learned a lot from, and it's had an impact on me. But one of the things he shared, which turns out is part of this poem, was that our children belong with us, but not to us. And I remember that context, that distinction was very powerful for me. Realizing like, okay, my kids really belong with me. They're here with me. I'm participating in life with them, but they don't belong to me. They're not my possession per se.
Yeah, he says, I think the first line of his, your children are not your children. They are the like fruit of life's longing for itself. And when I think of that, like I couldn't say that I can't possess life. I can't hold it for myself and
Right.
control it. It's not mine, you know. Even when I observe my own process in my own life, you know, like I'm almost barely in control of it too, you know. Like, and so when I consider like that sense of autonomy and reverence that I give for myself, the individual that is being guided, like, and I give that to my kids, you know, it's a really big perspective shift, because then you really realize that you have, it is a responsibility, you know, to cultivate life. And my wife likes to say too that, like, when you agree to bring children into the world, or when you're doing that work, like, the universe conspires to support you in every single way.
I love
because
that. I believe that.
Yeah, the universe wants to see itself thrive, you know, wants to see this aspect of itself really grow and blossom and bloom and just be amazing, you know.
Yeah, you guys you're all examples of life longing for itself.
Mm-hmm.
That's great, man. That's a fantastic perspective. Yeah, and so poetry really helped you. So how did that happen? How did you get introduced to it? How did it become a way was it something like, okay, you read it and it was starting to move you and it was starting to help you put life into context, and then soon you were like, wow, poetry is helping me make sense of some of my life?
It wasn't just poetry. It was also like Zen Buddhism. I like the beat poets, like when Zen was just first coming, when Eastern philosophy was really coming into the scene, and like in Berkeley, California, you have this mesh of hippies and then, you know, psychiatrists dropping LSD, and, you know, just had this really swirling matrix of expansion going on in that time. And so I kind of started dabbling in all of those, but really what it was for me was an inspiration, because I saw a new way that I could be. You know, like, I was told, since I came from an impoverished family, you know, they're like, the only way you're going to make anything of yourself, and this was actually a story they would tell me, is like, you need to go to school and be well off and then come back and save all of us. That's kind of what they kind of like set me up to do. And so obviously when school didn't work out and it wasn't for me, which I knew it wasn't for me, but I would, for different reasons, to develop my personality, my charisma, my affluence with women, like just different things like that were more of a priority. But when all of that fell through and I didn't know any other way, I didn't have anyone to reference, I didn't have anything. You know, I just happened to have a couple hipster friends that had some deep intellectual works sitting on their shelves. And when I picked one of these books up and I started flipping through it, and it was, I don't know, it was just really inspiring that I was like, you know what, these guys are awesome. They travel around the country, they write spontaneous prose, they get into trouble, they're ruffians, like, they live really adventurously. And I kind of had that kind of, a not caring personality. I really wanted to be on the wind and just be subject to whatever life had in store. And so it kind of inspired that part of me.
One of my mentors used to call it benevolent rebels. Which I kind of think we are.
I love it. I love that.
Yeah, man. I mean, it's funny. I definitely, there were some books early on. I remember the 4 Agreements really had an impact on me. Basically, even getting to the point, and I've still had to work on this today, but it's a process I'm still working through, but just trying to make sure that other people's opinions are their business, not mine, you know, and to not take anything personally, you know, which is one of those 4 agreements. And also to not assume. And in fact, one of the things I've been liking doing lately, which has been great, it actually feels really cool, is to assume I am the least smart person. I won't say dumbest, but the least smart person in the room, which has really it's invited some really great conversations for me with other people. I was in East Texas with my dad, and this past weekend, and you know, you never judge a book by its cover, right? They say that, and you shouldn't. But when you're in East Texas, have you ever been to East Texas?
I have not been east yet.
I'm sure there are places like this in Indiana, but you know, when you have a place that doesn't even have like a stoplight in the town, and you've got some characters, they're kind of old school. I'm beating around the bush, but rednecks, right? Like real rednecks. Like, I mean, straight up. Yeah. Like, and it's fine. I actually have trust me, to many people, I walk in California, I guarantee you, they're like, I'm a redneck. My own son was making fun of me last night because of the way I say raw.
Raw.
Yeah, I say raw. I don't know why. He's like, you say it so weird.
But with the drawl.
Yeah, I guess because I don't know. So he's like giving me stuff about that. But anyways, I was in the shed with my dad and some of his neighbors and these various people. And I was kind of like thinking, I need to place myself in the position of I very well could be right now the least smart person in the room. Right. And I took that. And then I was having these great conversations with these people. And, I was just having this really cool dialogue. And then one of these guys were showing me this collection of firearms that he had that was absolutely bonkers. Like there were some of the coolest rifles and pistols and old school stuff. And I mean, he was literally showing me hundreds. And I was like, oh my gosh, you have like a real collection. Like this is no joke. He's like, oh yeah, we take, I do professional photos with them. All this stuff. And when I first looked at this guy, I was like, we're going to talk about like, I don't know what he's going to talk about, but it wasn't going to be very interesting. That's what my opinion, initially, that's my gut was going, whatever. But then I just let that settle. And I was like, you know what? Hey, let's take a position. You don't know this guy. This guy could be brilliant. You've never talked to him before. So we start talking. And then I was like, wow, he's like got a whole nother level of experience and knowledge and depth, like extreme depth, like something I've never seen before in firearms, history of firearms. He had historical pieces that were from different wars and all kinds of cool things. Tell me about different actions and when they changed, actions to this and that and different, calibers. I was just like, I'm really impressed. He's like an encyclopedia for firearms. And I was like, man, I need your number. If I ever had any question regarding these things, I could easily call this person. And so then now we're going out to my truck and I'm showing him mine. Him and I are looking at my firearm and he's telling me about it. And it was just awesome. It was super, super cool. So yeah, it's an interesting, I don't even know how I got there. How did I get there?
I don't remember.
Me neither. Oh, well.
I don't know.
It was, you said something. It was just like, it just had me realizing like we just got to take a different perspective sometimes. And essentially one of the things that's come up for me in this conversation with you and I is almost this theme of like the position we place ourselves in has a lot to do with the outcome we experience. Like the perspective that we start our experience with or that we decide to place over ourselves, that little lens or that book cover that we wrap on ourselves has a lot to do with the outcome. And that's something I've been feeling like I'm picking up from you because I keep seeing you over and over. You're like a duck where like water just rolls off your back. I'm just like, well, what about the stress of managing 12 people? You're like, oh, no, that's wonderful. I'm like, what are you talking about? What about this? And you're just like, this duck. The water just keeps rolling. So I really just have been appreciating that about you.
Thanks, man.
Yeah.
Yeah, so I guess to go into that, like just a little bit, consider the inverse. If you brought up the question of stress and then I spent 10 minutes just dwelling on the aspects that are stressful, it doesn't seem that fun for anybody. So if I'm constantly dwelling on that part of it, like, of course that's what I'm going to get. And my whole body, my whole posture, everything is going to reflect that stress. So then in comes the tension, in comes the discomfort, in comes the clenching, in comes just general feeling of unease. Mm-hmm. But if I, because I'm obviously taking, like, I have the stress and I have challenges.
You're 32 years old with 12 people in your house.
I'm born for it.
Yeah, you were made for this.
Yeah, I've got the energy, I've got the time, I've got the interest.
That's another good. Yeah, this is a great thing. Like you're young enough, you're vibrant, you've got all the energy you could use, or you could need for that.
And what a better way to apply that than, it's ultimately service to the world.
Absolutely, man.
If each one of my children leave the house, a full, sovereign, like balanced, masterful person, or at least beginning that trek, that's wonderful because who knows what kind of work they're going to go do. And
we might need to send you more kids, man.
Hey, Bring him in.
So you might need a small village here, because it sounds like just so much intention and love and reverence to the entire process is put in with you and your family. And I'd love to come have dinner with you guys, man.
Dude, you totally
I'd love
should.
to get in there and bring my kiddos.
Please do. We got 100-foot zip line. We got trampoline. Like, we're gonna have a fire.
Yeah, man.
Yeah, it's just wholesome stuff. Like really making it kid oriented, and it's honestly more fun for me too, because I like to play. I go to the playground and play it for myself, and then I just happen to bring my kids along with me. Like,
that's great.
We don't plan anything for them. It's what I want.
That's great.
I'm kidding, but it just keeps that play alive, and that makes life really fun.
Man,
it's really adventurous now. It's a creative story. It's not a burden. It's not a struggle. It's really just exploration of this very finite time that we get.
I'm so inspired, dude. I literally, it's so funny to hear you and your perspective has actually relaxed my body, and it actually makes me. I love being with my kids. Like, everybody knows, I love having kids. Like, it's one of my joys in life. Like, we have so much fun, and like they're my fishing buddies, my gaming buddies. They're like having friends around, and we do a lot of really cool stuff. We like to draw together and just do all kinds of make believe stuff, and I get in full character. I can't imagine what my house would be like. I really do. I go all out, but like I'll pop out of the closet, and my son's like, "Whoa, where'd you get the cape?" I'm like, "Oh yeah, I found that in an old box." But we have such a blast. But there are times, where you're stressed, or you're thinking about like, okay, we got to do dinner. And one of the things that gets me, my kitchen, I don't know why I cannot seem to get a routine down yet. I'm going to add yet in there that keeps the kitchen clean, where the dishes, because a lot of times I cook, I would say 90% of the time. Sometimes we go out, sometimes we order, usually on the weekends when that happens. But most of the time I'm cooking, and I love the Instapot now. I've been cooking a lot of Indian dishes in the Instapot, which has been great. A lot of butter chicken and korma and stuff has really been good. But I love to cook, and so by the time I'm done cooking and everything, and then it's time to clean, a lot of times, like, I'm getting the other guys in there, and they're cleaning up. But then I don't know, it just seems to be a thing. That's one of the processes where I actually need to work on it more. I need to be a bit more proactive, come up with a system that works. And I used to think, well, we just need better tools. If we had better cleaning tools, this would go better. So I have like every scrub brush you could think. I got like
8 scrub daddies.
All the scrub daddies and all the different scrapers and brushes and stuff, bottle brushes and everything. So I got all the utensils. We got everything we need. All we need to do is figure out the right process, which is something we're working on. But either way, that was a long tangent to just say that, like, there are still little moments that when I hear your perspective and I think about all the people you're managing and stuff, I go, man, I could do that. I can take that on. I can feel that. I resonate with what he's saying. And sometimes I just, like all of us, we just get a little bit in the weeds. Mm-hmm. We don't have enough perspective. And you seem to have this great ability to just keep pulling yourself back, into this other perspective where it's like, no, this is a blessing. This is a gift. These are things to be cherished. There's so much fun to be had here. Let's keep pulling ourselves back out. And so I hope for the listeners that had the same effect. It certainly had a profound effect on me today. And just being in your presence, man. Thank you so much, Ryan.
Yeah. My pleasure, man. Thanks for having me out here.
Absolutely, dude. Well, we'll do more of this and have some more adventures. And maybe we can even go tape a little bit at your house and show them the table and the zip line stuff. It could be really fun to capture some footage and spend some time with you guys.
That'd be awesome, man. I'm actually really glad that we're friends.
Me too, brother.
Yeah.
Cool. Thank you so much. And thank you, listeners. If they wanted to get a hold of you, or if there was anything, if they wanted to follow you or anything, do you have like, do you do any of that?
I don't yet. Now, out of necessity, I'm trying to birth that. Where I'm doing it with my wife, actually.
Cool.
She has a fairly active Instagram account that you can see us on. It's homegrown. or at Homegrown. Mine is at Ryan J. Loo. I haven't posted anything on there yet. I have 2 things on there. So
gotcha.
I'm just, I've been doing other things,
Absolutely. Yeah. It sounds like it.
Yeah. I thought I was going to be a traveling poet bum. So, having to develop in this way is all very new to me, but I'm trying to figure out how I can use it in the best way. So for now, Homegrown would probably be the best place to find us.
Great.
Yeah. That's
great. Well, I'm looking forward to hearing some of your poetry and getting some of that out there. Do you have a short poem that you could share with us real quick?
Not that I could just rattle off my head, but I could share a poem if I'm allowed to read from it. You followed me for years, always on my shoulder, seeing what I see. And from time to time, you'd leap inside an open woman and shine through her eyes as though to suggest that you were with me and waiting. You followed me into the mountains and kept me company in the dark. The coyote and other things nipped at me from the blackness, yet I felt you with me and felt guided in just the dim starlight. You watched me while I sat by the stone sweating. No prayers in my heart then, I swayed and fought the fears of my discomforts. In my belly a soft glow, my soul or yours. Pure in my vision, beyond flesh or physics, you were there to assure me. You held my hand once as I slept for 16 hours. The moon was then full, and its light so pale amongst the sage and juniper. I kept waking through the night to see a long shadow reaching through my tent. I could feel a presence, though my mind was still part dreaming. And in the morning it was gone, the bracelet and its charm from a love that had gone away, but lingered inside. You took it in the night. You said that time has once again shifted. The love that has yet been delivered is on its way, and soon you shall see my face. And soon it was. A month later, in the small wagon, in the hand-built cabin, tending the fire with a woman and her child, a child that knew me from some other time. This woman you liked. You told me to press against her body, but only to feel how warm. You urged that she was real, and sure enough, I saw with my own eyes the thin thread that ran between us all. She called me down from my mountains to the city where she lives, and she offered herself to me in a fit of love, my imaginings dissipating into flesh reborn. Crisp, clear night, her and I, close together, sat smoking on a trampoline, and you spoke through me, prophesizing your emergence into this world, through the two of us there sharing. And so it was. 3 weeks later, at the height of our passions, I felt you leave me and enter my beloved. A pause as the afterglow set in, only a moment there to feel the pain of separation, the chaos of change, the grief of roads left untraveled, the belief of a humble spirit, the rapture of experience. You stewed for many months and listened to our conversations. You would hover around your mother and poke fun at my pretending. Sometimes I'd talk to you in my dreams, and I'd feel unworthy of your coming. And you were gentle always, with humor and a deep respect of my abilities. Through my beloved, you were grown, well-fed and nourished, until it was time for us to meet at last. Maybe we were all nervous, for your arrival was less than planned and bumpy the whole way, but bless the goodness in us all for maintaining a happy deliverance. You were born in the night, and tears streamed down my face as I held you in my arms.
Wow, man, that is awesome. I love how much that was tied to the context of your story. That was beautiful.
It could have entirely encapsulated it, yeah.
Right.
Sorry.
Ryan, thank you so much for being here, man. This has been a true joy and honor, and I'm really inspired by you, brother. I appreciate you very much. We hope you've enjoyed this episode. If you've received some value from it, please share it with other dads and consider leaving us a review on your favorite podcast platform, and we'll see you in the next episode. Looking for support with your fatherhood journey? Go to Bedadly.com and take our Dadly Disposition quiz and learn helpful insights on how you can overcome power struggles with your kids.